Welcome the Lord's chosen. Every lie is a ticking time bomb. It doesn't matter who planted it. It always explodes in the face of the one who built it. Think about that for a second. History has proven it over and over again. No false story has ever survived forever. In fact, researchers found that lies travel 6 times faster than the truth online. But here's the twist. They also burn out 6 times harder once exposed. And now, someone who once helped construct the web of deception around you is about to light the match that sets it all ablaze. That's the irony of betrayal. The very person who once stood on the stage of falsehood is preparing to pull the curtain down on themselves. And if you're wondering whether it'll be poetic, brutal, or just plain embarrassing, well, let's just say truth has a dark sense of humor, and right now it's in the mood for a show. Number 1. The architect of a lie always leaves their signature behind, no matter how carefully they try to cover their tracks. Lies are never as seamless as they appear when they're first spoken. They are stitched together with borrowed details, half-truths, and exaggerated shadows that don't quite fit. Over time, those stitches start to loosen, and the person who built the lie can't stop their own fingerprints from showing. It may not be obvious at first, but it always becomes clear who the real author was. Their mannerisms, their habits, their unique way of twisting reality, it all eventually points back to them. The interesting thing is that a lie can only be as strong as the discipline of the liar. And human beings are not machines. They forget what they said last week. They tell the story one way to one person, then adjust it slightly for another. Each adjustment leaves a gap, a tiny inconsistency, a hairline crack that might go unnoticed in the moment but adds up over time. That's why lies don't collapse because someone is watching too closely. They collapse because the liar can't keep their own invention consistent. Their own ego exposes them. Even when they try to make the story watertight, there's still a certain signature that bleeds through. Some people lie with arrogance, the kind that makes them over-explain, over-dramatize, or add unnecessary details that scream desperation. Others lie with cowardice, keeping their answers too short, too vague, hoping nobody will ask further questions. Both extremes reveal the same thing, the personality of the person behind the story. And once that personality is recognized, the entire lie becomes a mirror reflecting their face. What's fascinating is that the lie tells you more about the liar than the truth ever could. It reveals what they fear most, what they envy most, and what they're desperate to protect. In trying to destroy you, they've actually sketched a portrait of themselves. And when the moment comes for the truth to surface, that portrait is what people see most clearly. Not you, not even the story they tried to bury you with, but them fully exposed. The signature was always there. The ink was always wet. They just never realized how visible their handwriting really was. Number 2, exposure isn't a victory. It's a mirror. People like to think that when the truth comes out, the wronged person gets to raise their hands in triumph as if it's some kind of championship win. But the truth has a sharper edge than that. When a lie is exposed, the real power isn't in celebration. The real power is in the reflection it forces everyone to see. That mirror doesn't only show the liar for what they are, manipulative, fearful, desperate. It also shows the audience what they allowed themselves to believe. And it shows you what kind of strength it took to endure. The uncomfortable reality is that exposure doesn't hand out medals. It hands out clarity. Clarity about who was capable of constructing the lie in the first place. Clarity about the lengths people will go to protect their image. Clarity about the difference between what's said in public and what's whispered in private. And clarity, more than anything, can be ruthless, because it leaves no room for excuses. Once the mask falls, There is no way to put it back on without everyone noticing the cracks. For the person who spread the lie, exposure is devastating because it's not just the falsehood being ripped apart. It's their credibility, their reputation, their entire performance. They can try to spin it, backtrack or water it down, but the mirror shows them naked in their intentions. It reveals not only that they lied, but why they lied. Insecurity, envy, fear, greed. All of it becomes obvious in a way they can't escape. For you, exposure isn't about being vindicated in front of the world. It's about seeing clearly how unnecessary it was to defend yourself in the first place. The mirror reminds you that the truth was never in danger. It was only delayed, and that delay gave everyone enough time to witness the rot in the people who built the false story. What makes exposure so piercing is that it doesn't just uncover what's hidden, it rearranges the way people see. It flips loyalties. It erases false power. It forces silence in rooms that once echoed with accusation. And when all the noise dies down, what remains is that mirror, reflecting back the undeniable reality that the truth never belonged to them, and it never needed defending to begin with. Number 3, betrayal is never clean. It infects its creator first. People often think betrayal is just about targeting someone else, about wounding them, about creating pain outside of yourself. But the truth is, betrayal is more like a poison that leaks from the inside out. The person who chooses to betray has to live with the weight of what they've done, and whether they admit it or not, it begins to corrode their own sense of peace long before it reaches you. The damage they tried to plant in your life starts eating away at theirs in ways they can't control. The human mind was never designed to live comfortably with dishonor. Even when someone convinces themselves that they had no choice, or that you deserved it, or that nobody will ever find out, the seed of guilt still grows roots. They try to silence it with arrogance, distract themselves with busyness, or drown it in excuses, but it doesn't go away. That's why people who betray others often look restless, anxious, or defensive even when no one is confronting them. They become their own accuser long before the truth ever comes to light. Betrayal also breeds paranoia. Once a person crosses that line, they start to wonder if others will do the same to them. They project their own disloyalty onto the world around them. They can't trust easily, they can't rest easily, because deep down they know what they're capable of. And if they could do it, why wouldn't someone else? This inner suspicion keeps them unsettled, constantly looking over their shoulder, constantly doubting even those who were never against them. That's the infection spreading. The greatest irony is that betrayal often fails to destroy the target the way it was intended. Yes, it can hurt, it can cause setbacks, it can create scars, but the person who betrayed usually ends up losing more in the long run. Their character becomes known. Their name carries a stain. Even if people don't call it out openly, trust in them shrinks. Opportunities quietly close. Relationships quietly die. What seemed like a clever move in the moment becomes a long-term curse they can't undo. So, while betrayal feels like an attack aimed at someone else, the truth is, it's self-inflicted first. They thought they were burying you, but they were really burying themselves in layers of guilt, fear, and paranoia. In the end, the poison always kills the hand that poured it. Number 4, truth doesn't need your permission to surface. That's the part most people struggle to accept, both the ones who lie and the ones who are lied about. We live in a world where people think control is everything. Control the story, control the narrative, control how people see you. But truth doesn't bow to human control. It isn't waiting for approval. It isn't dependent on who shouts the loudest. And it isn't delayed forever just because someone has power or influence. Reality has its own rhythm, and when the time is right, it breaks through without asking anyone's opinion. That's why fighting for truth often feels exhausting, because the effort makes it seem like you're dragging something uphill, when in reality the truth already carries its own gravity. You can push it down, bury it, or try to smother it under endless distractions, but it will rise because it is heavier than the lie. The lie may float for a while, lightweight and appealing, but it doesn't have the density to last. Truth is inevitable, and inevitability doesn't negotiate. For the person who tried to bury it, this is terrifying, because they're not in charge of the timeline. They can't predict when the cracks will appear. They can't dictate who will speak up first. They can't stop the random slip of the tongue, the overlooked piece of evidence, or the quiet witness who suddenly finds the courage to talk. And that's the worst part for them, knowing that the truth is out of their hands, yet closing in on them at its own pace. For you, the one who was targeted, the release is different. You don't have to spend your life convincing people or screaming for validation. The truth was never yours to carry like a burden. It was always working its way to the surface with or without your defense. That's why you'll notice when truth arrives, it doesn't come gently. It comes in a way that leaves no doubt, no loopholes, and no space for denial. It dismantles everything that was built against it, brick by brick, until only reality remains standing. The powerful thing is this: you don't have to make the truth happen. You only have to survive long enough for it to reveal itself. Because whether people are ready or not, truth is patient, and patience always outlives deception. Number 5. Their alliance wasn't loyalty, it was insurance. That's the part people rarely see at first, because on the surface it can look like unity. It can look like a team bound by a shared cause, moving with confidence and certainty, all singing the same chorus against you. But dig deeper and you'll find there's nothing noble about their connection. What ties them together isn't trust or love or respect. It's fear. Fear of what the other knows. Fear of what might be revealed if they don't hold the line together. Fear that their own secrets will be dragged into the light if one of them slips. That kind of alliance is fragile because it's not built on strength. It's built on desperation. They're not standing with each other because they believe in one another. They're standing there because they don't dare stand alone. Each person in that circle knows too much about the other, and so they cling to each other like thieves who agreed to keep quiet after the crime. That's not loyalty. That's a hostage situation disguised as friendship. You can always tell when an alliance is made of insurance instead of loyalty, because there's tension underneath their unity. They over-defend each other. They speak too loudly. They move as if they're afraid of silence exposing them. Real loyalty is quiet and steady. Fake loyalty is loud and performative because it's hiding cracks, and the cracks are always there. The moment pressure rises, suspicion begins to spread among them. Who will talk first? Who will save themselves? Who will betray the betrayers? The truth is, people who come together for the purpose of destroying someone else are already doomed. Their agreement is only temporary. As soon as exposure threatens, they turn on each other, because their bond was never about trust. It was about survival. And survival always makes people selfish. So when you see that alliance, don't be fooled into thinking you're up against something unbreakable. You're not. They're only as strong as their fear, and fear doesn't hold forever. Eventually, one of them decides that protecting themselves is more important than protecting the group. And when that happens, the so-called alliance doesn't just weaken, it collapses. Because it was never loyalty in the first place, only insurance that couldn't pay out when the truth came due. Number 6, the lie they built became their only identity. At first, it might have seemed like just another tactic, a way to discredit you, to gain power, or to shift blame. But over time, something much deeper happened. They stopped simply telling a story about you and started living inside that story themselves. They had to keep retelling it, refining it, and defending it until it wasn't just a tool anymore. It became the framework of their entire existence. They weren't merely fabricating. They were reconstructing their own sense of self, brick by brick, around a falsehood. That's the tragedy of sustained deception. It doesn't just damage its target, it consumes its creator. Each time they repeated the lie, they invested more of their own identity into it. They adjusted their friendships, their public persona, their private thoughts, even their future plans, to keep the narrative intact. Eventually, the line between their real self and their invented self blurred, and they became a prisoner of their own invention. Without that narrative to feed off, they'd be exposed as hollow. You can see it in the way such people talk. Their language narrows. Their stories become rehearsed. Their emotions are triggered not by what's true, but by what might threaten the illusion they've built. They stop having authentic reactions and instead perform reactions that serve the lie. It's not just manipulation anymore. It's identity maintenance. They're no longer living for reality, they're living for the preservation of a mask. The cruelest part is that once a lie becomes someone's identity, they can't stop even when they want to. The cost of telling the truth becomes too high. To admit the lie is to admit that their entire public face, their alliances, their decisions, even their self-image, were built on something false. So they double down. They defend harder. They alienate anyone who might challenge the story. And with each defense, they erase a little more of who they actually are. By the time the truth breaks through, there's almost nothing left of the real person behind the facade. The mask has eaten the face. They aren't simply guilty of lying about you anymore. They've lost themselves in the process. The story they built to destroy you has become their only anchor. And when it finally unravels, it won't just free you. It will leave them with nothing at all. Number 7. When the lie cracks, all their other lies become visible too. That's the thing about deception. It never exists in isolation. One falsehood always needs another to hold it up, and another after that to protect the second. Before long, the liar is juggling an entire architecture of fabrications, each one propping up the rest. They think they're clever, maintaining this fragile balance, but all it takes is the first fracture for the whole network to unravel. The moment one thread snaps, the weight of every other hidden detail starts pulling loose. The first collapse is never the end. It's the signal. It's like pressing on a wall and realizing it's hollow, then watching the entire structure fall apart under its own emptiness. Once people see that one piece of the story was false, they stop taking the rest at face value. Suspicion spreads fast, and suspicion is lethal to liars. Suddenly, everything they've ever said is put under a microscope. Every convenient excuse, every carefully packaged narrative, every little half-truth they thought they buried deep, becomes a potential confession waiting to spill out. And it does spill out. Secrets don't sit quietly once the first has been exposed. People who stayed silent before find their courage because now they know the liar is vulnerable. Details start slipping, contradictions multiply, allies turn cautious, and every hidden agenda begins crawling out into the light. The liar can't control the pace. It happens too fast. The truth doesn't unravel politely. It pours out violently like blood from an open vein, and no one can stop the flow once it starts. That's why liars often fight so desperately to defend even the smallest crack. They know what others don't yet realize, that one fracture threatens the entire dam. They understand that exposure doesn't just take down the original lie, it takes down the whole scaffolding of their false identity. And when that scaffolding falls, it's not just a story that collapses. It's their reputation, their relationships, their standing, their ability to command trust ever again. The irony is that what they thought was a secure vault was really a thin shell. They built their life on a structure of glass, and the first crack, is only the beginning of the shattering. Once the light gets in, it doesn't stop until everything hidden is fully seen. Number 8. Their confession won't be redemption. It will be survival. When people hear the word confession, they often imagine remorse, a guilty conscience finally breaking under the weight of its own shame. But that's not what's happening here. This isn't about cleansing the soul or seeking forgiveness. This is about panic. This is about self-preservation. The person who helped build the lie isn't suddenly growing a conscience. They're calculating an escape. They're exposing the truth because the truth has already started closing in on them, and they're hoping to get ahead of it before it swallows them whole. You can tell the difference between a confession born from guilt and a confession born from survival. Guilt confessions are quiet, personal, and costly. They're made without any assurance of protection or benefit. Survival confessions, on the other hand, come at the last possible moment, when the walls are already cracking and the liar senses their own downfall. They're strategic, they're rehearsed, they're less about honesty and more about damage control. What's happening beneath the surface is fear. They're not scared of the truth itself. They're scared of being the only one left holding it when it bursts open. They're terrified that someone else will speak first, or that evidence will surface without their input, leaving them exposed and powerless. By confessing, they're trying to reposition themselves, to shift from villain to insider, from co-conspirator to whistleblower. They're hoping to rewrite their role in the story so they look less guilty when the full picture emerges. But survival confessions are transparent to anyone paying attention. They don't carry the weight of sincerity. They don't restore trust. They don't heal the damage done. Instead, they reveal just how deep the manipulation went, because the same instinct that made them build the lie in the first place, self-interest, is the same instinct driving their confession now. And that's why their confession isn't redemption. It's not a clean break with the past. It's the final act of desperation from someone who realizes the truth isn't just looming over them. It's already on the move. The truth is no longer something they can manage or suppress. It's become a predator with its teeth in their story, and they're scrambling to save whatever scraps of themselves they can before it devours everything. Number 9. Silence protected you more than it protected them. When lies are thrown around, the natural instinct is to defend yourself, to rush into every room where your name is mentioned, to argue point for point until people finally see the truth. But that instinct, while human, often does more harm than good. The more you fight a lie, the more oxygen you give it. The more you try to dismantle it directly, the more attention you bring to it. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all, not because you're weak, but because silence has a power that lies can't withstand. When you refuse to react to every accusation, you did something they never expected. You denied the lie the energy it needed to thrive. Lies demand constant attention. They rely on confrontation to stay alive. They depend on the liar repeating them, defending them, adjusting them every time they're challenged. But when you stayed silent, you starved the lie of its fuel. You forced it to live on its own, unsupported, and that's when the contradictions started to show. Lies can't survive in stillness. They need noise, and you refuse to provide it. What your silence really did was put the burden back on them. Every time they added more detail, every time they adjusted the story to cover a gap, every time they tried to force others to believe, they dug themselves deeper. They had to keep working overtime to maintain the illusion, while you were free to live your life without carrying that weight. And the longer this went on, the more obvious it became that their story didn't add up. The cracks widened, not because you tore them open, but because the lie was never strong enough to hold together without collapsing under its own contradictions. The irony is, that while they thought your silence made you vulnerable, it was the very thing that protected you. You didn't need to prove your innocence in every conversation, because the truth doesn't need an audience to exist. It waits patiently while lies self-destruct. And when the collapse finally came, it was undeniable. Not because you shouted louder, but because you didn't need to. The weight of their own falsehoods was heavier than anything you could have said. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy written in patience, and it shielded you more than words ever could. Number 10, the lie cost them more energy than it ever cost you. People think that when a lie is told, the damage lands hardest on the person it targets. And yes, being lied about can wound, isolate, and frustrate. But the one who truly carries the heaviest burden is the liar. Because a lie isn't a single act. It's a daily commitment. It has to be fed, rehearsed, defended, and reshaped every time it starts to show cracks. What began as one false story becomes a full-time job, and eventually, the weight of maintaining it drains the very person who created it. Every day, they had to remember who they told, what they said, and how they said it. They had to adjust the story to fit new situations. They had to manage the doubts of others, keep their allies in line, and silence anyone who might contradict them. That's not effortless. It's exhausting. Lies don't sit still. They multiply, and each one demands more energy than the last. So while you were carrying the sting of being misunderstood, they were carrying the endless stress of trying to hold together a crumbling house of cards. Survival and maintenance are two very different things. You only had to survive the weight of falsehood, endure the looks, the whispers, the unfair treatment. Hard as that was, it didn't require you to invent, edit, and constantly re-perform a false identity. They, on the other hand, had to nurture their lie like a fragile creature that would die if they ever stopped feeding it. And the thing about lies is that they're greedy. They demand attention every single day. Ignore them for too long, and they start unraveling on their own. That's why liars live in constant vigilance, never resting, always calculating. This is why, in the end, they look drained and unstable while you still stand. You didn't waste your strength trying to manipulate reality. You just lived through it. They spent their energy creating a parallel world and policing it, but reality never bends forever. The truth always presses back, and fighting against it is the most tiring battle of all. So while they thought they were burying you, they were really burying themselves in fatigue. The lie demanded more from them than it ever took from you, and that's why they're exhausted now, not you. Number 11, the truth will not arrive softly. It will arrive like an invoice. People often picture exposure as a quiet moment of clarity, a gentle unveiling of facts that neatly put everything in order. But that's not how truth works when it's been delayed, buried, or twisted. Truth accumulates interest. It grows heavier with every day it's ignored, every time it's denied, every time someone builds another layer of deception on top of it. By the time it finally breaks through, it doesn't show up politely. It shows up like a bill that's long overdue, stamped in red, demanding full payment with penalties attached. For the ones who built the lie, this moment isn't just uncomfortable, it's devastating. They're not only facing exposure, they're facing a reckoning. Every excuse they made, every false detail they added, every person they manipulated to keep the story alive becomes another line item on that invoice. And when the truth comes, it doesn't just say you lied. It says here's the cost of every single lie you told, every trust you broke, every mask you wore. It tallies everything and demands it back all at once. This is why exposure feels so violent to the liar. It's not a single moment of being found out. It's a collection notice from reality, showing up with interest compounded. The humiliation, the loss of credibility, the destruction of relationships, the sudden silence of former allies. All of that is the payment, and unlike money, they can't negotiate the amount or delay the due date. The debt is emotional, social, and spiritual, and it's already overdue. For you, the one who was targeted, this truth arriving like an invoice is not about revenge, it's about balance. You don't have to fight to make the liar pay. The very weight of their deception has already been accruing interest. They thought they were getting away with something, but all they were doing was borrowing against their own future, and now reality is here to collect. The truth may take its time, but when it finally lands, it lands hard. Not as a whisper, not as a gentle warning, but as a demand for full repayment. And by the time it arrives, they're already in debt they can't escape. Number 12. The audience they fooled will become the jury they fear. This is one of the cruelest twists in the downfall of a lie. The very crowd that once applauded them, believed them, defended them, and echoed their accusations becomes the same crowd that demands answers. Public opinion has no loyalty. It only has momentum. It will cheer for whoever seems strongest, but the moment that strength starts to look like weakness, the cheers turn into silence, and silence quickly turns into questions. People don't like realizing they've been manipulated. They may forgive mistakes, but they rarely forgive feeling duped. When a lie begins to collapse, the shock for the audience isn't just about the truth of the situation, it's about their own embarrassment for having supported it. That embarrassment breeds anger, and anger needs a target. The liar, once their hero or their trusted source, becomes their villain. The audience starts picking apart everything they once accepted, not out of curiosity, but out of a need to reclaim their dignity. This is why public opinion shifts so quickly. It's not a moral awakening, it's survival of reputation. No one wants to be caught standing on the sinking ship, so they scramble to distance themselves from the person who led them onto it. Former supporters begin rewriting their own memories. I always had doubts. I never fully believed. I was misled. This quiet mass exodus leaves the liar increasingly isolated. The safe crowd they once hid behind becomes a tribunal, not because they're suddenly righteous, but because they're protecting themselves from being dragged down with the collapsing story. And there is no refuge from this shift. Lies create their own temporary audience, but that audience was never truly theirs. It was only rented. Once the narrative starts to crumble, that rented crowd leaves, taking with it the illusion of power and credibility. The liar who once fed off applause now faces scrutiny. Every smile becomes a raised eyebrow. Every supporter becomes a potential witness. That's the moment the liar fears most. Not exposure from their enemies, but exposure from their own believers. Because when the people they deceived turn, there's no corner left to hide in. The applause fades. The crowd becomes silent. And then the silence becomes judgment. They're not just losing a story, they're losing their last refuge. Number 13. The same mouth that lied will now speak against them. This is one of the inevitable consequences of manipulation. The people they recruited, pressured, or persuaded to spread their story are the same ones who will eventually dismantle it. Not out of loyalty to you, but out of loyalty to themselves. Self-preservation is stronger than manufactured allegiance. And when the lie starts to rot, no one wants to be caught holding the smell. At first, these people may have been enthusiastic participants, repeating the false narrative with conviction. Some did it out of fear, some out of convenience, some out of a desire to belong. But whatever their reasons, it wasn't built on real loyalty to the liar. It was transactional. They got something out of it: protection, access, validation, and as long as the lie felt safe, they stayed. But the moment safety turns into risk, that transaction ends. They stop parroting the script and start rewriting their lines. What happens next is subtle at first. Someone leaks a small detail. Someone retracts a statement. Someone says, "I was pressured," or "I didn't know the whole story." These small cracks widen quickly because nobody wants to be the last person defending a collapsing narrative. The manipulator may think they've secured silence, but fear shifts direction the moment exposure becomes inevitable. People stop fearing the one who told them to lie and start fearing the consequences of staying quiet. And fear, once it changes sides, is unstoppable. That's why the most dangerous witness isn't an outsider, it's an insider. The very mouths that once gave the lie its power will give the truth its volume. Each one speaks not to clear your name, but to save their own. They'll frame it as honesty, as coming clean, but underneath it's survival instinct. And as more of them break ranks, the story begins to flip entirely. What once looked like a chorus of agreement turns into a flood of confessions, and the liar stands alone. In the end, they're undone not by their enemies, but by their allies. The mouths they used as weapons become echoes of their own undoing, not because of your fight, but because of the laws of self-interest. Nobody wants to drown with a sinking ship, and they'll shout the truth to stay afloat. Number 14, the collapse of their lie is the birth of your narrative. For so long, their story about you was like a cage, a version of you they crafted and repeated until it seemed to overshadow everything else. But the moment it breaks, something powerful happens. You're not just getting your name back, you're stepping into a space they unknowingly built for you. All the attention, all the curiosity, all the drama they stirred up becomes a stage. And suddenly you're not standing in their shadow anymore. You're standing in the spotlight. This is why their downfall feels different from simple vindication. It's not about proving them wrong or clearing your reputation. It's about realizing that their falsehoods accidentally created the platform for your truth to be heard louder than it ever could have been on its own. Every time they dragged your name into their story, they were, without knowing it, building an audience for your eventual emergence. They turned you into a subject of conversation, and now, when the truth surfaces, all eyes are already on you. But here's the deeper shift. When a lie collapses, it doesn't just leave a void, it leaves an appetite. People who once believed their narrative are now searching for the real one. They want to understand what's true, who you really are, and what actually happened. In that moment, you're no longer reacting to their script, you're writing your own. And because their credibility has shattered, your words carry more weight than ever before. What was once a weapon meant to break you becomes the very platform that elevates you. Their attempts to bury your name planted seeds instead. Their attempts to silence you created curiosity. Their attempts to destroy you built a stage you didn't even have to construct yourself. And now that the lie is gone, the space is yours to fill, with your story, your truth, and your own voice, unfiltered. This is why the collapse of their lie isn't just an ending. It's a beginning, not a return to who you were before, but a new version of you that stands taller because the falsehoods gave you an arena. You're not reclaiming anything, you're inheriting it. And now the spotlight isn't borrowed, it's yours. Every lie they built, every alliance they faked, every secret they buried, it was all temporary. It existed only because they tried to bend reality to their will, and reality never bends forever. The truth doesn't need permission. Silence can be your shield. And lies always carry a cost far heavier for the liar than for their target. The moment their story begins to crumble, the very people who once amplified it become the heralds of its collapse. And the stage they accidentally built for your destruction becomes the platform for your emergence. Every manipulation, every accusation, every desperate effort to control perception was not a victory for them. It was fuel for your vindication, patience, and rise. What was intended to cage you becomes the wings that lift you. What was meant to silence you becomes the audience that now hears your truth. And the collapse of their fabricated world doesn't just free you. It exposes them, exhausts them, and leaves them facing the consequences of their own making. In the end, the story wasn't about defeating them. It was about outlasting them, letting their own lies suffocate under their weight, and stepping into a narrative that was always yours to claim the moment the facade fell. The brilliance of this is in the irony. The power they tried to wield over you is the very thing that ensures your emergence stronger, clearer, and undeniable. Their fear, exhaustion, and desperation are now your confirmation that truth always prevails, that patience always outlasts deception, and that integrity, even when attacked, can never truly be stolen. You've survived. You've observed. And now, the spotlight is yours. If you found yourself seeing the truth in every word, make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. Like this video if it opened your eyes. Comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Your voice matters. And share it with anyone who needs to see how lies always reveal themselves in the end. Every click, every share, every comment isn't just support. It's part of spreading the truth. And together we make sure deception never stays hidden. Join the movement because the truth waits for no one. But now, it's time for you to take your spotlight. Stay blessed always.